Let's meet at the library. Okay.
Hey everyone, it's Julia and welcome back to my channel. Today we have my 2019 stats slash year-long wrap-up, kind of. I know I did a stats video once. Might have been 2018, might have been 2017. Your guess is as good as mine. Even though I've only made one year-long stats video before, I've actually been loosely keeping track of my reading statistics since 2016, so I'm a nerd. Other than from 2016 to 2017, I actually feel like a lot of my reading statistics have kind of plateaued, which isn't very exciting, but you guys don't know them as well as I do, so like whatever. But yeah, the amount I've been reading has been increasing every single year, but a lot of the numbers are like weirdly similar, so we're gonna run through that. I just feel like for this whole video, it's me thinking about Kayla from Books and Lala and how amazing she is at, well, talking about anything, but like her stats videos are just impeccable, and she like owns every single book and she like lines them up, and I can't. I would love to do that. I'm not that organized. Maybe you'll get some kind of like spread of all the covers somehow. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I'll find a way to show you. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, let's just run through it. I'm going to be talking out loud just some of the things that I thought were interesting about my reading, and I'll put little infographics up here so you can see the pertinent information. Okay, so first off, I read 108 books in 2019, which is up since last year because I've been increasing every year. I think this is partially due to the fact that I've become more involved in the online bookish community, but also has to do with the fact that I introduced audiobooks into my life and then more frequently listened to audiobooks, and now I'm listening to audiobooks at 1.75 to 2 times the speed that they are originally at. So I just like keep increasing my consumption of audiobooks, which you'll see, we're gonna get to that. Across those 108 books, I read 37,342 pages. The average length of book that I read was 346 pages, which sounds about right. That's kind of like an average book. The average rating that I gave my books this year was 3.7 stars, which honestly is not that bad. I was pleasantly surprised by this. Goodreads told me my average rating was 3.3 stars, and I was like, well, that sucks. But Goodreads has no nuance. You can't even do half stars. Whereas on Excel, I can be like, I gave this book 4.2 stars. This book got 2.7 stars, and like, there you go. So I'm actually okay with 3.8. It sounds low, but I am picky and weird and rate things weirdly. If you're new to my channel, you might not know that. If you're not new, you know that. So I'm not too surprised. My quote-unquote best reading month, meaning the month in which I read the most books, not necessarily my highest average rated month, was July, in which I read 17 books. That still blows my mind. There's a retroactive wrap-up about it if you missed it. And my worst reading month was November, in which I read 4 books. They were big books, as you'll be able to see up here, because I read long books in November, but also that was when I gave myself a very specific reading challenge, and clearly I failed at it if that was my worst read month. It's fine. But here's the wild thing. From 2019 to 2018, those are my exact same best and worst reading months. I read like 5 books in November in 2018, and I think it was only like 11, but it was still my highest read month, and I was like, that's weird. It shows like seasonally how much I like to read. Like, okay, midsummer, I'm ready to rock. Holiday season, I can't even. And on average, the rest of my reading months were about 6 to 11 books, so they're more in the middle. As you'll probably be able to see up here, even my lower read months kind of evened out page-wise. So like in April, I didn't read that many books, but I read frickin' Les Miserables. So things like that. For my most read genres, here's where we start off with no one being surprised. My most read genre was historical fiction at 18%, followed by low fantasy at 13%, also checks out to me. And then contemporary was 11% of the books that I read. That one kind of surprised me. I think historical fiction technically would actually be higher, but some things are tricky to rate, like something like Jane Austen and the 12 Days of Christmas or whatever that book was. Like, it's a mystery. Like, it takes place in Georgian England, but it's a mystery. So I categorize it under mystery, even though it is historical fiction. So yeah, just like weird things like that. I'm questioning how much of that low fantasy was historical fantasy. You know. I've got a brand. It's fine. I'm still waiting for the year when classics ends up in my top percentages for genres. Maybe it'll be this year for 2020. What's the classics challenge? I'll put the video down below in case you're interested in classics, because Lucy the Reader posted it, and why can't I think of like the actual information about it? It's fine. It's just encouraging people to read more classics, basically. As for star ratings, I have weird ratings. We've talked about this, but when I talk about a star range, I'm gonna mean like a 2-star range is anything from 2 stars to like 2.9 stars. You with me? I don't do like 2.99. That'd be crazy. Thank God I only had to rate one book at a 1-star rating. It was actually 1.5, and it was The Bronze Horseman. No one is surprised. I gave 19 books ratings in the 2-star range. That pains me. It was mainly like a lot of weird, I'm gonna try this books, and they just kind of flopped for me. Things like The Virgin Suicides, where I'm like, it's a classic, didn't love it. Or Bashful, like, oh, it's just a fun theater-based romance, this relationship is stupid. Things like that. In the 3-star range, I read 39 books, which is a healthy number. Honestly, like, I'm not mad at a 3-star book. A 3-star book for me is just something that I read, I wasn't mad at, could be a little forgettable for me, depending on the book. And depending on what someone is specifically into, I might recommend it, I might not. But like, that's a fine number for me. In the 4-star range, I read 43 books, so that is good. Kara from Wild Book Garden did such an interesting video recently. I'm questioning now if I ever commented on it. I'm a terrible friend. But it was talking about like, give 5-star ratings, don't be afraid. She made very valid arguments. I can't do that because I am a freak, but I loved what she said in that video, and I think that like looking at this graph, it makes sense to me, because she was like, I would never want my average ratings to look like a bell curve, because then I'm reading mostly mediocre books. Because it is so hard for me to rate a book 5 stars, like it has to literally change my life to be a 5-star book. It makes sense for me that the majority would be 4 stars, because like a lot of them are right up there towards amazingness, but probably just have like something little wrong with them, because we're human, mistakes happen, people have faults, and authors are people. And like a fair amount of 3 stars, and then it tapers off with lower scores, like that looks perfect for me. And then I read 6 books that I gave a perfect 5 stars. I'll pop those up here somewhere so you can see them. The creme de la creme. P.S. Out of all of the books I read this year, all 108, only 4 were rereads. Half of those were Shakespeare. Killing it. As far as demographics go, these numbers are no surprise to me. 56% of the books that I read were like adult marketed books. 34% were YA and 9% was middle grade. Actually, I'm surprised middle grade wasn't higher. I feel like I read a good amount of middle grade this year and I love middle grade. But that's just something to bear in mind for this year. Pick up more middle grade. As far as the format goes, this ties back to my earlier rant about how I'm listening to more and more audiobooks. 32% of the books that I read were physical, hold in your hand books, slightly more paperback than hardback, in case you were curious about that. 6% of the books that I read were ebooks. I'm almost certain they were all graphic novels. Maybe like a play or a galley or something random. Pretty sure they were all graphic novels. And then 62% of what I read was via my ears, which I'm not mad about. Like, I still read way more books than the average person reads in a year. I just personally want to increase the percentage of physical books that I'm reading. I don't know how to explain that. I just want to dedicate more time to sitting down and holding a book and reading that way. I love audiobooks. I think they're amazing. They're so convenient for my lifestyle. I just don't want them to be the main way that I'm reading, and they currently are. So, yeah. Now for the publication dates of books that I read, they were mostly in the 21st century, with 2016 to 2018 being the highest by far percentage of books that I read. Second place being 2011 to 2015, so all like fairly recently published books. I read 9 books that were 2019 releases, as well as 9 books that were published before the 20th century. I would like that second statistic to go up. I don't know. I feel like 9 new releases is kind of fine with me. I love reading new releases, and I love like being excited about new books and like keeping up with the hype that everyone's talking about, but also I'm trying to buy fewer books. So when they're releasing during the year and I'm trying not to buy books, you can see how that doesn't quite add up. By the way, I didn't mention this yet, but I only DNF'd 3 books this year. That's pretty good for me because I really don't like to DNF books, as you can tell by me sitting through 800 pages of The Bronze Horseman. The first one was a romance novel called Marriage of Unconvenience. Jocelyn and I actually tried to buddy read this, and we both like could not stand it. There were literal like errors in the formatting. To be fair, we were both reading this as like a free for review ebook, so like those things can happen, but it was to the point where there were like formatting things where we couldn't understand who was saying what, and it was just like it needed some more rounds of editing, and neither of us was really feeling the romance, so we just kind of said, no, we're over it, and we didn't finish it. I also DNF'd a middle grade novel called The Problem Children. I liked the sound of this. It sounded like kind of a series of unfortunate events-esque, but it was so annoying. All of the kids in the family had like these weird personalities where like one girl I feel was like a fox or something weird. Like she was just like really animal-y. And the youngest, literally, like, I think their name was Toot, and they didn't speak, they just farted. And I was like, I get that this is a book for kids, but even if I was a kid, I would think that's so dumb. Like, I can't do that. And the last book that I didn't finish in 2019 was Call Me By Your Name. I feel awful about this. I tried to read it so hard. I went to a book signing of Andre Aciman, and he was so well spoken. I loved listening to him. It was a great time. You'll probably hear, I don't know if you're gonna hear about this in my November vlog. Spoilers, November's retroactive wrap-up is also a vlog. I just couldn't stand Elio. Like, I get that he's a teenage boy, but I've never had to read about a character being so dang horny all the time. Like, boy, get it together. Oh my god. I couldn't stand him. So I was I couldn't do it. Like every time I tried to pick up the book, I was like, I'm done here. And also it's a book that doesn't have chapters. Why do we hate chapters? Chapter breaks are a godsend. They're so good. Yeah. I do still think the movie is very well done, and I own the sequel now. So I don't know if I should like sell these or what. Ooh, I don't know. But there's that. Also, here's a fun tidbit. Out of all of the books that I read, I owned 56 of them, which is not that bad. So like some audiobooks I listened to, I happen to own a physical copy, or like, you know, I'm like reading things that I already have in my possession, which is good. That's why I'm trying to read so much of my backlist, is because I own so many books that I haven't read and they're just sitting here and I need to read them. Didn't you love that interpretive dance? Wow. Okay, here's where we go into author stats, and I feel ashamed. So of the authors that I read in terms of gender, I read 24% male authors, 74% female authors. This doesn't surprise me. This is pretty on par for what I read. And then 2% were like a team of authors that had more than one gender. For the country that those authors were from, 76% were from North America. 22% were European, and 2% were Asian. I think we can diversify that a little bit, don't you? Yeah. And this is what blows my mind, both in terms of like thinking I was doing all right and also just weird coincidences. 86% of the books I read were by white authors. 14% were people of color. So immediately my brain goes, okay, I thought we were reading diversely. Clearly we're not. We need to fix that. Part of that is because I've been reading so much of my backlist, and I just happen to own a lot of things that are written by white authors, and in future years my backlist will look more diverse because I am continuing to buy more diverse books. That's not the point. But those were literally the exact same percentages that I read in 2018. How is that possible? Which in a way is good because I read more books, so that means I actually read more books by authors of color than I did in 2018, but that's still a measly percentage. I know I can and should do better. So that's why it's a goal in my 2019 bullet journal that I started. I mean 2020. What year am I in? It's fine. Also, one last random fact. 73% of the authors that I read this year were new to me. 27% of books I read were from not new to me authors, which is interesting because I only had 4 rereads. So it was like a lot of me like either discovering an author and reading another one of theirs, or just being like, okay, I read that, let's give something else a try. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, I think that's it. In case I haven't managed to find a way to address this yet, let's just show all of my, well, we know my 1-star read. Let's show all the 2-star reads of the year. Great. 3-star reads. There's a lot of those ones. 4-star reads. Highly recommend all of these books, TBH. And the precious 5-star reads, which I've already shown you, but let's show you again because they're gems. And that's it. Those are my reading stats for 2019. There are some things that I'm noticing, like interesting patterns, some things where it's a pattern and I'm like, stop, don't be a pattern anymore. We're gonna change it. But for the most part, I'm not angry with any of that information. I don't know why this is interesting to other people. Like, I get why I'm interested in my own statistics, but if you sat through this, kudos, I guess. Share with me some of your most interesting reading nerdy stats of the year down below. I would love to know how many books you read, or like a goal that you met, or a goal you're setting based on something you realized from your reading in 2019. I love all that dorky stuff. And make sure you like and subscribe if you are so inclined, and you'll be seeing more of me soon. Bye.